This clip is brought to you by BattleOnline.com.
Okay, peace family. This week we joined with another super duper exclusive special guest, and this time it's Shawn Brauch from. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Brauch. Yeah.
Okay. You see, that's the. I'm just reading it. So Shawn Brauch from the legendary Pen and Pixel Graphics. Now, Pen and Pixel, I know a lot of people are going to be familiar with them from the hip hop days, the gangster rap culture that was very prominent in the 90s and still pervaded through in the hip hop industry to this day. Working with such heavyweight juggernaut labels from No Limit Records, Cash Money, Suave House. Shawn, it's a pleasure to have you join us on the platform. How's things with you, sir?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you tapping in. As I was saying to you even prior to this, I've been a huge fan of Pen and Pixel, obviously, with just my affiliation with being a fan of hip hop and just, a huge consumer back in the 90s and stuff when I was younger as a teen and stuff like that. So your work was very influential. You had so many of us even trying to replicate it in our own ways and stuff too.
That's good to hear. That means we were doing our job right.
No, 100%. So, kind of just going back a bit, it says that you guys started, you and your brother Aaron, and started the company up in about 1992. How did things kind of come about for you to start up a graphic production company? And was it something you was doing prior to music and then sort of fell into the music industry with it?
Yeah. So I was actually out in New Jersey. I actually worked in New York City at an advertising agency out there. And my brother was brought down from Washington to Houston by James Smith. He actually knew another gentleman called Cliff Blodgett who knew James Smith. And Cliff Blodgett and James Smith would sort of set up a studio above James Smith's car dealership. He had a car dealership and he set up a studio up there. And he brought Cliff down. And my brother and Cliff went to school. And Cliff said, "Hey, there's this new type of music out called rap music. And he thinks that it could be a gold mine." And he sort of described the whole thing to my brother. My brother has a business background and a computer background. And my brother was like, "Wow, that's pretty interesting." He's like, "Yeah," he goes, I think you should come down and check it out." So my brother came to Houston from Washington, took a look at the operation and said, "Yeah, we could do something with this," and kind of put Rap a Lot together with James Smith and Cliff Blodgett, kind of built up a good business structure. And they started putting out albums, Prince Johnny C. They had Royal Flush. The Ghetto Boys had just started their thing. Willie D, Bushwick Bill, Scarface. Obviously, everybody knows that. They started putting that stuff together, and they were like, "Wow, we're putting out a lot of albums, and we're sending a lot of the artwork out to get done externally. We weren't doing it indoors at that time." And they knew that I was an artist. I'm a designer. So my brother was like, "Hey, why don't you come down here and do some storyboards for us and see where it leads?" And I was like, "Well, I'm single. I have nothing else to lose. I've always been interested in doing album covers since I was a kid." I said, "Sure." And I came down and we just started working at Rap a Lot together, and the rest is sort of history.
Wow. So, even Rap a Lot, I forgot to mention them, how could I? And, but, definitely huge, major players in the hip hop industry. James Prince has definitely gone on to do big things. Scarface, Willie D, all those guys. Rest in peace to Bushwick Bill and stuff as well.
Right.
So was you a hip hop fan then yourself of the music, or was it more of an introduction that it just culminated then at the time as well?
Yeah, it was a definitely introduction, sort of a shocking introduction. If you because I listened to Celine Dion, and I'm going Celine Dion to Scarface, and I was like, well, there's a transition. But it just like hip hop now, once you hear those licks, and you can play it to almost any audience, and once they hear those licks go down, you just start bopping, and you're like, wait a minute, there's something going on here, right? And then the message comes out in the music, and you're like, wow, this is a lot deeper than the stuff I normally listen to. So with that and that depth and those messages coming through, I was like, this is another type of art form. I said, this is awesome. This is really, really cool. And obviously it didn't need a lot of instrumental background. It didn't need a lot of formal training. It didn't need a band. It needed the ability to put these beats together, put those rhymes together, and make it make sense. And there is a lot of talent out there. And once you give people the ability to use it, they can get out there and they can make some wonderful things happen. And I think at Rap a Lot, I think we were able to do that.
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, when we look at some of the iconic covers, some of the rapper like ones are included and stuff as well. You mentioned even yourself just being an artist. I guess I've got to ask, you know, in the early days, just coming up with the initial art direction, because you would, you know, they would have, I guess, would have asked you for like examples and stuff. What pool did you dive into yourself to start looking at, you know, ideas for stuff to show them and stuff like that? What was going through your mind and thought process to bring about some of your early designs?
So we would sit down with the artist, and sometimes James would be there. We'd have a sort of a powwow meeting with marketing and everything else, and we'd sit down there. We kind of go through what was conceivable, and of course, things are only conceivable by your limitation of your imagination, right? So once you understand that you can do these things in Photoshop or these things in the computer, now your imagination starts to expand, and now it gets wilder and wilder and wilder. And that metamorphosis is sort of what we saw at Rap-A-Lot, where we were like, wait a minute, we can add that on top, and we don't have to go here to do that photo shoot. We can shoot you in the studio. We can take that car and we can put that here, and we can do an explosion, and we can do. And people were like, really? And I was like, yeah, we can do it. Let's give it a shot. And we would go into these think tanks and we'd start sketching. You know, that's one of my things. I sketch, right? So we'd sketch this stuff out. We'd show it to them. They're like, yeah, I like that. Add this in. Take that out. And eventually we'd come down with a solid sketch. Once the solid sketch was there, we just start building it, right? We'd grab the explosion. We'd grab the cars. We'd do the photo shoot exactly as indicated in the layout. We start putting the stuff together in Photoshop. It was magic.
Wow. And you know, we're going back now. I know a lot of people now are familiar with not only just Photoshop, but I guess the ease of some of these apps. You can like put a picture on an app now and click one button and it cuts out the image and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But those days, I mean, where you're coming from, can you try to explain? You really had to do a lot of work, didn't you?
Right. So think of a 5-star restaurant and then think of a caveman. We were at the caveman stage. So we were lucky to get the pictures. We were lucky to make the scans, desktop scan. Remember, there was no CD scan, there was no digital file.
Wow.
So we would scan them in on a desktop scanner, hope that the file was large enough. If it was too large, it would crash the computer. So then you'd have to restart the whole system over again, Photoshop 1, in beta test,
Wow.
Photoshop 1. Scan the whole thing in again, save it, hopefully it's saved to your hard drive, and then hand cut it out, pathing it, cut it out. But back then with Photoshop, remember that those layers, once you released the layer, it stayed. There was no going back. So now with the layers, you have the ability to throw them down, move them back and forth, change them. You're like, I didn't like it. Not back then. When you released that mouse button, that piece stayed there. That was it. And then you go to save. So you do all the work, you go to save, the system crashes. 4.5, 5 hours worth of work, gone. Start again. But the difference with us, my brother and I, is we understood really, really quickly that if we didn't make notes, that the file size couldn't be over 15 megabytes. The piece couldn't be a total of this. We would make these notes and we'd write all these notes down in a book. And it was basically our little black book on what to do and what not to do with Photoshop.
Wow.
And that was part of the beta testing, that we actually would transfer the information back to Adobe and say, with this capability of computer and memory, this is what you're capable of doing. But it was very painstaking, to say the least. But we did come up with some great stuff, and we learned a great deal in the process.
No, that's tremendous, and even just as you said, just thinking about it and likening it to a caveman era to the Genesis going forward. So
it was caveman style, let me tell you.
I mean, you know, you guys were definitely known for what they've got it labeled as gaudy and outrageous styles, but just different themes, but still having a common look and identity. I mean, we would see things kind of move forward, going from more of the elaborate style with the bling bling. I mean, can you remember who was really the first to come and start really doing those the blinged out covers with you?
I think, you know, it's hard to put that into perspective, but I'm almost positive that it was Master P. And he was the first one that really sort of demanded that we take the bling bling or the diamonds and kind of drew it into the text, which I was like, oh, that's an interesting concept. But the word bling bling, I believe, came from Brian Williams with Cash Money. I believe I was on the phone with him and he said bling, and I was like bling bling, and it just metamorphosized from there. And that's what I remember. They may have been using that term. I don't read the lyrics, but they may have been using that term prior to that. But then from now on, when he would call up, he's like, yeah, I want you to bling bling it, man. I want you to hook it up. You know what I'm saying? And I'd be like, all right, I got you. So that term just took off, and then it applied to everything. It applied to the jewelry, it applied to the girls, it applied to the cars, it applied to everything.
Yeah, it definitely helped set a precedent that we've seen even continue on to the mixtape era in hip hop. A lot of people, started what they would call the iced out covers and the iced out style, just as a throwback or homage to that sort of style. I mean, I came across an article and it had the top 10 covers that I don't know if it was that you picked out yourself, but it was your top 10 most iconic covers. Do you still stand by that list, or?
I don't know which ones are on there. I mean, I have a couple that I know that are seriously iconic, and when people talk about Pen and Pixel, those are the first 5 or 10 that pop up. So
well, we had the BG, the first BG Chopper City from 1996.
Right. Yep. Is that the one with the Rolls Royce on the table and the champagne glass? And
no, this is the one where it's like it's raining down the hail of bullets.
Oh, that was the first one. Okay, that was a cool cover because so BG, obviously a young whippersnapper then. I think he was like 15 or 16 years old when he came in the studio, and he's like, yeah, this is what this is all about. And I was like, well, explain to me what you're talking about. He's like, well, the streets are so dangerous. It's like AK-47 rounds are like flying everywhere. And I was like, wow. I go, that's like a really dangerous environment. Like if you were to walk on the street, it's like raining down. And he's like, yeah, exactly. I was like, well, let's go literal with that. So I went out and bought a 50 caliber round. That's actually a 50 caliber round from a big Browning machine gun, and it's inert. And I drilled a hole through it, and I put a coat hanger through it. And then I went into the studio, and I photographed it at all these different angles. And then I brought BG in. This is all done separately. And then I brought BG in. I was like, okay, I need this pose. Same lighting, same everything else. Then I took a street scene from, I think it was like the Magnolia Projects.
Okay.
Popped him in that, and then added everything else to it. And he was like, "That's insane." And when people see it, it was that shock element that you looked at, and you're like, "What the f?" Right? And that I realized at that time that if I could stop you in the record store when you were peeling through those CDs, and you could grab that piece and take a look at it and go, "What?" Once you have that wonder in your mind, you need it to be satiated, right? You need to find out what's in that CD. So you buy it, you take it home.
Yeah, no,
Job done.
That's a fact. I made definitely a great job, and it still holds up because even when people watch this back, they will see the cover on the screen. But even still looking at the cover to this day, it still brings out those same elements. It's just so iconic, so impactful, and you see a young BG, you could imagine what people would have been like towards it then, just seeing something like that, because nobody was putting together covers of that sort of style and magnitude. Now, you mentioned just people seeing stuff in the stores, and it kind of brings us back to No Limit and Master P, because even myself as a early hip-hop No Limit fan, I spent a tremendous amount of money in the stores each week, and a lot of it was based on seeing which covers, and and those were the covers that attracted us out of a wide variety of hip hop, coming from a multitude of other labels and stuff as well. So, in terms of your dealings and stuff with Master P and let's look at maybe more so like the '98 covers. Even though we had the ones that you did earlier and stuff prior, like the ones that people really remember, those ones in those jewel cases and stuff as well. Did you guys have a part to play in that, putting in those cases and stuff as well?
So P came up. I mean, obviously P's a marketing. I mean, he set the precedent for marketing hip hop, right? And it's not just hip hop, but that marketing strategy that he developed spread into other genres of music. And it's just commonsensical, really. If you're putting out a product, you have a captive audience once they buy the product, correct? So you know that you're hitting the apex of your market. Those are the people that are buying it. Why not advertise all your upcoming products? So they have this anticipation that now they're like, oh, got to check that out. got it. Oh, dog, man, Mia X coming out with something else. Got to check that out. Got to check that out. Well, you put 12 covers inside the inside with a place that you can order them from, and now you've just expanded that whole product line. In addition to that, you've also given them a visual identity. So when they go to the store in a month, when Mia X comes out, they're going to know what to look for. There's that identity. They're like, I'm going to check that Mia X out. Where is she? Where is she? Got it in your pocket. Smart man, right? Then he did merchandising as well. So he would lay these whole extended covers out. And then he's like, you know what? I got to be different than that, because when you see them on the rack, everything is either transparent or black. He's like, no, I'm going to do neon orange. I'm going to do neon green. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then, of course, with The Last Dawn, he did that ventricular look where you could actually move it back and forth. And again, when he talked to me about that, I was like, what do you want to do? He's like, well, I want my hand to go back and forth. And I was like, okay. So we had to buy a software program that would actually break the files up and then send them to the printer. Because if you pull that card out, you'll look at it, you're like, it's kind of weird.
Because you got two. You had the one in there, then you got the card and stuff in there, which had that.
That's right. Yeah. But that was his idea, and he would come to us, and we're like, being Pen and Pixel, you never say no, right? So we're like, yeah, we'll make it happen. So we did. It was awesome. Smart guy.
I mean, in terms of P, we have had some No Limit fan questions who have asked about one particular album, the Tank Dogs, Beware of Dogs, and they said, was the album, they said, was it actually ever going to have a release date from when they shot the album cover? So I guess they're asking, like, was you working on some covers just in provision that the albums were being done, or was you given the music and stuff, or I guess to work with them? I'm guessing from the look of their question.
Yeah, so that was an interesting cover because that cover was composed of multiple photo shoots that we had shot prior. Oh. So a lot of times when you get the artist in the studio, you have a very limited time with that artist, and you're going to try to get as many shots as you possibly can, knowing that you're going to be using those in future albums, or that you're going to body double them, or you're going to do something else. So we would shoot a lot of, like with Snoop, we'd shoot a lot of face shots, a lot of full body shots, a lot of semi-pose shots where he's turning a different way, different lighting, because we knew that we're going to definitely use that some other time. And that was one of those cases where they had Snoop on the album, and they had Fiend, and they had Mac, and they had everybody else that was going to be on there as well. I think Mystical's on there as well. And then there was some sort of juggling that they were pulling people off or adding people on. So we were working back and forth, putting people on, pulling people off, sending proofs off, and it just got into this quagmire. And I don't know if it ever got released or not. I mean, when I pull up on the archive right now, I must have 4 or 5 different covers for Tank Dogs.
Wow. So there's,
yeah.
I know you've probably got some other ones that we haven't seen. I know we've probably seen about 2, maybe one with Mystical and one without it, perhaps. But
right.
Obviously yourself, I know you probably got quite a few different versions and variations.
Yeah, there's a lot of behind the scenes ones and there are some concepts that we've done for P and for Cash Money and from others that we went through the whole development of sketching it, laying the whole thing out, finished artwork, and they took a look at it and they're like, no. Like, okay. that was 24 hours of wasted work. But you know what? That's not a problem. Let's start again. Let's do this again. And we have a lot of those covers that people have never seen, and they're tucked away in archive as well. One day we're going to go ahead and expose that in a book, and you'll be like, wow, that's what that was going to really look like.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing. I know they had was it an event I believe was it in France or somewhere that they had yeah, and they showcased a lot of the stuff, and I believe that went quite well.
Yeah, the Paris show, we worked with the Reebok in Paris, and they had a solo show that it was like a pop-up. It was a 3-story pop-up, one of the largest things I've ever seen for a pop-up. But it was a building that they took over, 3 stories of artwork of Pen and Pixel, and they had DJs there. It was phenomenal. The place was packed. It was great. It was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. We've got a couple of more fan questions before we, I suppose, get back to some of the iconic covers. I mean, to be honest, we could be here for all day. It's very hard even picking iconic covers because there's so many. But some people have asked who spent the most on covers and what was the average sort of asking price, I guess, for a cover to get done.
So in the sense of spending the most, so you're going to be looking not at Cash Money and not at No Limit. You're going to be looking at Universal Records, HBO, Sony, and DreamWorks. So once you deal on those realms, because those covers, they have to go before a committee to get approved, and the approval process can take weeks, months, and then the different formatting of those covers. It's not your standard CD and poster outline. They need stuff to go in Times Square. They need stuff to go on the side of the MGM brand. They need, I mean, to the point of ridiculous. I mean, the Cher cover, for example, must have had 42 iterations of how that was going to be formulated, and all of the ads in all the magazines, which we took care of as well. So you have to compound that on top of the art. So the art for something like that was about $6,800 to $7,000 for the Cher cover. But then you talk about the iterations of laying these things out, and you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars to lay that stuff out, right? Because it's just so many. Chris Rock was probably $4,800 for Chris Rock's cover. The average price for a custom piece back then was about anywhere from $2,900 to $3,500 for a totally custom piece. But we had different areas that you could order from. You could order a standard plus, a deluxe plus, a custom, a super custom, and then a millennial. And the millennial started at $3,000 and went to $6,000. So on average, probably about $2,500 for a cover.
Okay. Was there like a rough time process on it, or did you have some projects that I guess ended up being longer than anticipated, or one that really took long to get completed, but once you got it done, you were really happy with it?
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously 19,000 some odd covers, right? I mean, you're talking about generating these on a McDonald's scale, right, of burgers coming out, and you have to have a big staff to handle that. You have to have a lot of management to handle that. So keeping our A-list clients, the ones obviously Master P, 3-6 Mafia, DJ Screw, Cash Money, keeping those guys happy was sort of one realm of our company. We had sort of a division that just handled the A-listers, and then we had other divisions that handled the guys that were up and comings. And then once they transitioned from up and coming to selling 1 million copies, we're like, no, those are A-listers now. So they would go into a next category. So it was a whole different type of management that would happen with their projects. When they would say jump, we would ask how high without a problem. Their deadlines, especially with Master P and Cash Money, they were very business-oriented people. So they had definitive deadlines set, 2 to 3 months out. It wasn't one of these where they would rush up and go, I need this, tomorrow, which would cause a lot of problems, right? It would interrupt the whole production schedule. But we did have clients that would actually do that would come in and say, this is what I have. I want it done tomorrow. You're like, wow, I mean, we can do it, but it's going to cost a lot of money. Yeah. So, and some clients would come in, we'd do the whole sketch process. Like I said before, we'd sit down with them. They'd agree. They'd sign off on the approval. We'd do the photo shoot. We'd do everything else, get everything ready. And they would look at it and they would say, that's not what I want. And you're like, well, okay. I mean, how are we going to go about this? Let's have a kill fee, we called it. So if they were going to kill the project, it would be half the cost of the cover. So $2,500 cover, you're going to pay $1,250 for a kill fee, and then we can start again. And sometimes the kill fee would be like, no. Okay, let's go with the cover and let's move on. And sometimes they were like, yeah, not a problem. I want a new cover, and we would do it. So it's keeping the customer happy. That's the key thing. And for us, it was not just keeping the customer happy, but it was also making sure that we had the best marketing point we possibly could give them. So when they went out and put their CD on the shelf, it was competing against, in a lot of cases, our own other products, Master P, Cash Money, 3-6 Mafia. But in order to play in that game and get that attention, you need to have that stuff done at that level. And they understood that. They understood it very quickly when they were out there.
Okay. And it says that you guys closed your doors in 2003. I mean, was there any particular reason for that at the time? Was it just with the nature of how things are moving with just technology in the industry? And, we do know that you would come back in 2020 and do some artwork with 21 Savage and Metro Boomin. Yeah,
so the close down of the company, I mean, it's unless you own a company and unless you've actually built one, the closest analogy I could possibly say to any parents out there, I'm a parent myself, is basically when you have a child and your child has passed on. When you put that much of your life into a company and build it from zero to, 27 employees to 10,000 square feet, and you were there every step of the way, working 16, 17 hours a day. I mean, sleeping at the office was absolutely common with us. We had cots at Pen and Pixel in order to generate that much artwork. Our artists would sleep there. So it was insane. They would wake up 4 o'clock in the morning, jump on a cover, sleep, come back, sleep, come back. It was nuts. And then all of a sudden, to close that down and to physically break up the furniture, break up the files and throw them into a dumpster.
Wow.
Tragic, just disheartening. And I'll never forget it, but it had to happen. Napster came in, 9/11 hit. People were not getting on airplanes to fly anymore. The TSA had restricted the amount of cash that you could carry. And in turn, that affected how we were getting paid, because most of our payments were not from the A-listers. The A-listers would do wire transfers and what have you, but from our B-listers and people that were up and coming, they would pay in cash. And that was a problem because they couldn't get on an airplane with that kind of cash. So that affected everything radically. But Napster, I think, had the death nail for us, right? So you're getting music for free. You're a producer investing in an artist. You've put $250,000 into his music video, his CD, his posters, his ads, and you hear it in every car going by, and you're like, but I've only sold 1,000 CDs. How does everybody in Atlanta have this music? How does everybody in New York City have this music? You only sold 1,000 CDs. You can't recoup the cost. As a businessman, you look at that and you go, I'm not going to do that again. Right? So the music industry was way lacking in picking up on that streaming. Whereas the movie industry now, as you well know, they got on board really quick because they knew that was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
So they watched the music industry and they said, we can't afford that. Too dangerous. So we were at the tail end of that. We're the marketing element that produces all that stuff. You're a producer. You all of a sudden look around and go, I don't need marketing anymore. I can do a little tiny CD cover, put it on stream, and that's it. So we had to let quite a few people go. We gave them as much notice as possible. We paid off all of our vendors, and after paying off all the vendors, there's not a whole bunch left. We had to close up shop and call it quits. So I still did artwork, but on a very, very limited basis. And I still do artwork now, but it's on a very limited basis. It's stuff for like Drake, and it's usually these high-end polo grounds, things like this. I mean, people that are needing custom artwork at that level that they can't find anyone to really mimic that type of artwork, so they come to the original, and I'll generate that.
We did have some fans that asked, is it commonplace for graphic designers to have so many plaques? Because I don't think that would probably happen as much nowadays as it did for you guys then.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the studio, I've got, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 plaques, but I think all in with Pen and Pixel, I think I'm thinking 60, 65 gold, 15 or 20 platinums. Yeah, so in the Grammys, I was on the board of directors for the Grammys for a while when I was in Houston. When you're participating in the album and the album sales, if you have any sort of participation in that, you can apply for those gold awards, and they will recognize you as being on the credit list of the album that sold 500,000 or sold 1 million or sold 40 million. And you apply to the RAA, and they go ahead and they certify it, and then they send you the plaque, and that's how you get them. So yeah, it was pretty cool. It was fun. It was a great marketing thing at Pen and Pixel because we had rooms that were full of those, just as far as your eye could see. And when you'd walk into Pen and Pixel, you're like, oh my god, right?
I could imagine
you knew
a sight to behold.
It was the office was our marketing tool. So when you walked in and you thought that you were just coming in for a small little cover for $500, you didn't leave with a small little cover for $500. You knew that you had to move up that game and move up to the next level in order to get to where these platinum and these gold artists were.
Oh, definitely. Well, before we wind down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this in, I guess, as a segue with getting back to some of the iconic covers, but still tying in with one of the newer covers. So I'll ask you about, I'll say maybe about five covers, and
Sure.
time to do that. So we got the 21 Savage and Metro Boomin cover. So
Okay.
what was that like putting that together?
Well, obviously you probably read some of the stuff out there. So the original cover was very, very different from what you see there, right? So our normal modus operatus is at Pen and Pixel, we always talk to the artist. I've never done a cover without talking to the artist. I talk to Cher, I talk to Chris Rock, I talk to all those artists before I do any artwork. And the reason being is because I need to hear it from their voice, what they want, so I can convey that into a sketch. With Savage, I did not have that opportunity. He was in the studio, Metro was in the studio, so I was dealing with their management team. The management team told me X. I did X, multiple sketches, details, what have you. They provided photographs, and I put it together as spec from very detailed sketches. I actually have those sketches and I could forward those to you. Very detailed sketches, all approved. Done, finished the artwork, gave it to them. They were happy with the artwork. Metro and Savage looked at it and they're like, no, it's not hard enough. So, but the deadline had already been reached. And the release was like 2 days after that or whatever. And I was like, no way. I have never missed the target. I've never missed the target by that far. And they were like, you need to redo it. And I was like, I in a day? It took me 3 weeks to do that artwork. Right? So that was a very clunky operation. And I'll never do that again. I will always stick by what I've always done and talk to the artist. If I can't talk to the artist, then I won't do the artwork. It just wasn't worth it for me. To have, number one, to have a disappointment like that, to number one, miss a deadline, which I'm a deadline freak. Right? I can't handle that. So it's a shame. They used certain elements in it. The knife, we had created the knife, and the knife was representative of when Savage got shot, and all of his friends were labeled on there, and the text was used. But other than that, everything else in that cover was put in by them. And it's a shame that they had to do that because they had to dissect the original cover to make that happen. Yeah, it was very painful for them, I know. And so not one of my prouder moments, but again, because I didn't follow my own rules, I ended up paying the price on them. So
okay. Well, we appreciate you sharing that story with us. I mean, the next one that we've got here, this one was probably a bit more fun, and it was the Mercedes rear end cover.
Mercedes rear end. First of all, she's an amazing person. Always smiling, always fun, energetic, but yet she's really classy, right? Which is, you see that cover and you're like, well, no, I mean, she's a really classy lady. So we get this concept, we do a sketch, and of course it's a very literal sketch, but a lot of people don't realize, number one, that was all shot in the studio. Okay. So her bottom section is one picture. Her torso is another picture, and her head is another picture. And then we had her leaning forward on a table. She was not leaning on a car. Then we brought the Mercedes in, removed the symbol, and then changed the color of the Mercedes, put the Mercedes with that background that you see back there, and then knocked her text out, and then did the reflection in the green marble underneath. And it turned out attractive, shall we say. You can't take your eyes off it for many reasons.
It wasn't shot at the same time as was it Alexis? Was it Alexis also as well? Was that one shot?
Alexis. Yeah, so Alexis was a different photo shoot as well. Again, that was completely shot separately. Everything else was added into that as well. So we did a lot of that because it was easier for us to shoot in the studio and manipulate the background than try to take a composite that had already been done or try to take a car, because it didn't give us the malleability. If I wanted to change the car to a Rolls Royce or to a Bentley, I could do that. But if she was already shot with the Mercedes in that one shot, it wouldn't flow with the rest of the flow on that piece of artwork. And that flow or the spiraling is what we sort of patented, is the methodology on which we can control your eye. And that's very, very important in a pen and pixel piece, is we want your eye to do a certain thing on that cover. And that's the mastery that a lot of people haven't got to.
Uh-huh.
They don't quite understand how it's done.
I think you just gave away a little bit of not the mastery on how it's done, but a bit of insight there.
Yeah.
So we just got to take a short break momentarily and just finish up with the last few questions.
Let them know who lead the charge. They can run, but really won't get too far. Check your drill figures repertoire. Set pace like Escobar. Get a superstar. Woo-ha, they all in check. 960 degrees, all goes to rest. You guess, the Cosmic King is back popping. Number one in the streets, the flow stunting. I'm here now.
Yeah, so thank you. Just picking back up from that, looking at some of these iconic covers. We've got 8 Ball and MJG coming out hard.
Oh yeah, that was that's the one. Is that the one with the Lexus and they're going on the freeway?
Yeah.
So that was that cover's kind of iconic because that was one of the very first covers that we did for Suave House, and that was done with desktop scans. So Tony Draper, great friend, and definitely put us on the map. There, I mean, got to give props to that guy. Also another marketing genius. He really had a good sense about him and a good businessman. So he came to us and he's like, yeah, this is kind of what I have in mind. And we're like, okay. He's like, well, I want them in a convertible Lexus. And I was like, well, they don't make convertible Lexuses in the SC400 version. He's like, yeah. So I was thinking we could do one. It's like, all right, let's see what we can do. So 8 Ball and MJG came to our apartment. We were working out of an apartment at that time, and they pulled into the back parking lot. And I went out with my camera, and they had a convertible Mustang. And I was like, well, convertible Mustang, convertible Lexus. We have Photoshop. We can make that happen. So I shot a whole bunch of pictures of them like leaning and chilling. And I was like, yeah, that'll work. And of course, they at that time didn't know. They're like, what are you going to do? I go, we're going to put you in a convertible SC400. They're like, they don't make a convertible SC400. I go, they do now. So I went down to the Lexus dealership and I was like, could I have a brochure on the SC400? And they're like, well, sure you can. Brought it back to the studio, scanned in a normal SC400 desktop scan, went in, cut the top off, put them inside it, changed the interior color to tan because it was red, and put it on the freeway and put a little blur on the wheels and put the Houston skyline behind him. And I was like, look at that. And that was the first real special effects cover that we did for Tony Draper.
Yeah, that's a classic. You know, shouts out to those guys, especially 8 Ball and MJG. They recently did a versus battle, which was quite good. It was good to see them back in the forefront as well in hip hop as well. So definitely legends. And as you said, that is a legendary album and cover, which people still look at and admire and stuff to today. So hats off.
It's amazing. Thanks.
We've also got, switching over, I guess, to the Cash Money side, the Baller Blocking movie and soundtrack.
Baller Blocking movie soundtrack. That was a cool cover because we actually had the full posse at Pen and Pixel to shoot that, and it was one of those covers again where we're shooting and the background is unknown, so you have to kind of, nowadays everybody shoots on a cyc wall or a green screen, so it's up to your director to really tell you what your actions are going to be and what's going to be behind you. We had to do the same sort of thing with them. However, they bought real guns and real guns on the studio. I mean, it's intimidating just knowing that they're real guns, but going in and double checking to make sure that they're all unloaded because they're actually going to be aiming that at you was sort of nerve wracking. Little Wayne there at the age of 14 with a Tech 9, pointing straight in my camera, and I was like, okay. So we shoot all the images, knowing how we're going to do it. We shoot the close up faces, and the jewelry they had their own custom jewelry, and we would literally shoot each piece by piece. They were all custom Rolex watches, and they would bring in they have these auto winding boxes that would wind the watches, like turn the watches, and they're all felt line, and they're made by Rolex and Gucci and Coach, and they would bring these boxes in with the jewelry, and they would lay them all out, and we would shoot each individual piece, and then they would put them back in the box, lock them up, and take them back to the car. So we shot everything in one day, and then we put the whole thing together, and we have the guns and we have the little explosions, and I mean little explosions coming out, so you could still see that they had guns in their hands. And we put out a version of that, and they went to Walmart to try to distribute it, and Walmart had a new rule that they didn't want to see any guns in anyone's hands. So they sent the artwork back to us, and we had to increase the blast marks coming out of the guns to cover the guns up. And that's how it happened. It probably has, I'm going to say probably 40 or 50 layers in it as a Photoshop document. The cops, the cop cars, the street, the Magnolia projects, the sky. I think it turned out pretty well. I was pretty pleased with it.
Yeah, it was good. I definitely was fond of a lot of the Cash Money Workers stuff, even the Hot Boys covers, the Guerrilla Warfare one was definitely a standout to me and stuff as well. The Wayne covers, most of their covers, I think, when I first saw some of Cash Money's early stuff, it was similar to No Limit's covers, but then they started to sort of, I think, have their own identity within their covers and stuff as well. They had a similar element with, I guess, some of the bling text on some of the stuff, but it moved forward from when I think of like, the big timers, how you love that, and that had the sort of same sort of bling style. And I think BG had one where he was on the phone and he had like a skull cap or something on, and I always thought that looked similar to like Master P or like a Master P cover in a sense. But so those are quite interesting. So lastly, I guess one last question a lot of people want to know in terms of the hip hop industry working with such juggernauts and pioneering labels from your Rap-A-Lots and Suave House, No Limit, and Cash Money. Who was your favorite to work with?
It's hard to say in that regard. I mean, my brother and I are very business oriented and we're very mission focused. So the more organized you were, the better you got along with Pen and Pixel. So both Master P, Brian Williams, and Ronald Williams, they both fell right into that category of being extremely well organized. And I would say both of those were our favorites to work with. They said what they wanted. They were clear in their communication. They paid on time, which is always important.
That's always good for that.
Yeah. And they were consistent customers. They were consistent, and we could see the progress made with both of them bringing up the South. I mean, they elevated the South into, like you said, the juggernaut of hip hop. And before that, it was always East Coast, West Coast, and the South was the third coast. And yeah, maybe that happened, and maybe this happened, and they were sort of like the stepchild, right? Well, with those two guys on board, pushing the way they did and marketing the way they did, it just brought everybody else up to that level. Then you had DJ Screw going in and screwing things and twisting things. Then 3-6 Mafia came in. And then the Ghetto Boys started really packing it up. And I mean, it just brought it up like a big mushroom cloud, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Both of those guys, I would have to say, yeah.
Okay.
It was good. Obviously, Tony Draper, again, massive props to Tony. Because if Tony did not have that faith in us at the very beginning, we never would have had that exposure to attract Master P and Cash Money. Without him, we wouldn't have been able to do it. He really gave us free reign and really got that stuff out there. And then people were asking, "Where'd you get that? Where'd you get this?" And that one thing led to the other, right? It's organic. That's how the business was built. So we're really happy with those clients.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Lastly, just as a quick sidebar, did you do any stuff for UGK?
Yeah, we did stuff with UGK. In fact, we did some of their very first stuff. It was like this one black album with like blue, like a cyan blue text. It was like one of their first ones that came out, and I was like, and I listened to UGK, and I was like, that's tight. They got their stuff down, but they never really put a whole bunch into their album covers, right? Their album covers always kind of were, I'm going to say, street hardcore. Their branding and their logo was super tight. I mean, and I think that they relied on that. And of course, their music was on another level all itself. You knew UGK when you heard it. The first 5 or 6 licks, you were like, "Ooh, hardcore," right? But it was awesome, and I think they did really well by doing that. I don't think they needed the bling bling. I just don't.
Yeah, no, they definitely was different. I was just thinking as a sidebar, but and you mentioned being in Texas and stuff as well. So I know those guys were heavy around that era. But we definitely appreciate you taking time to lace us with some game and give us some knowledge on, how some of these iconic covers came together, the process. Hopefully it will inspire even people out there, just even the determination, the hard work that you guys put in, and even just the work that it involved and entailed to make these covers come together and make some of these albums even just as successfully as they was, because some people may say, it's all about the music, which we do know, we love the music, but a lot of the times, even when it comes to the sales, it was the covers and stuff as well. Additionally, in a lot of aspect, helping push some of those things forward, just the art direction and the marketing and stuff as well. So we definitely salute you guys for your accomplishments within hip hop and the community,
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. It was a great ride. We had a good time. I still enjoy doing the stuff now. My stuff now is a lot more detailed. I mean, 150 to 190 layers in Photoshop. I mean, it's basically unlimited on what you can have. And I'm great that I'm really grateful for the fan base, and I'm grateful that it still has this momentum and has carried hip hop into another level and really brought the South up. It was a fun ride. It was good times. Thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate it. So if anybody wants to find you, they just go over to the website if they want to maybe.
Yeah, you can go. Yeah, you can go to www.penandpixelcovers.com, or you can go to www.smartfacemedia.com, and you can click a link there, and you can hit me. You can also hit me up on Instagram. Got an account on Instagram if you want more information, and I'd be happy to help you, give you prices, talk about concepts, and maybe move forward.
Okay, salute. I'm sure you'll be getting some hollers, man. There's artists that were so inspired from those days that are still trying to replicate. So I'm sure people will be getting in touch.
I'll give out tips. I always do. I mean, if somebody has ambitions and they're putting in that effort, I will help them. If they want to know something, just ask me and I'll tell you what it is. Okay.
Much love. So we thank you again, once again, Shawn. This is Fonzie for BackThatOnline.com, and hope you guys could join us back next week. We should have a different guest. I'm not going to say who it is, but it is somebody else who will have some insight to drop on one of the labels that we spoke on earlier. So that's the most I'm going to say. But Shawn, thank you for joining us once again. We appreciate you, and we'll speak again soon.
All right. Thank you so much. Peace out.
Peace. Peace, family. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check us out on BackThatOnline.com. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook for exclusive playlists and social media for all different types of segments and content.